Well, hello everyone. It's Larry Kotlikoff with Economics Matters, the podcast. I'm delighted to be back, truly delighted to be back with my buddy, late in life found buddy, George Kinder, who's an absolutely wonderful person. I'm just kind of reading from what we wrote in the last podcast describing you. So if this sounds familiar to some people, I wrote that George is a absolutely wonderful person with a unique philosophical approach to personal finance. He puts the horse before the cart, self-awareness before personal financial decisions. Uh, we had a delightful conversation the last time around about how he approaches life planning, a method of financial planning that is he's taught to thousands of financial advisors around the world. And he's got an extraordinary bio. He's an author, international thought leader, life planner, life planning pioneer. He's been at the forefront of the financial services industry for many decades. And he spearheaded a movement to put the lives that clients desire to live at the center of their financial plan. So it's not all about money at the end of your days. How much can you accumulate? How much can you end up therefore paying Uncle Sam and taxes for nothing? And he's written books. We're going to talk about his latest book that just came out, workshops. He's given workshops, speaking engagements. Um, and he founded the Kinder Institute for Life Planning in 2003. Three books in the past were The Seven Stages of Money Maturity in 1999, Lighting the Torch in 2006, Life Planning for You in 2014. They're considered foundational and essential works in the field of financial life planning. So we're going to get kind of right into it just real quickly. George is a graduate of Harvard University. He earned the bronze medal in Massachusetts on the National Uniform Certified Public Accountant exam in 1975. So he's an accountant and also, I guess, a CFP. Uh, and uh, he's won different awards. He's a mindfulness teacher and artist. So he's a very interesting person. Uh, he's not the everyday personal financial advisor that there are 350,000 of in this country. He's not an economist, financial planner like me, kind of on the side. He's a real human being who's got some secrets here for us about how to, I would say, expand our time, might be a way to put it. Uh, he's written a book called The Three Domains of Freedom. And uh, there's three kind of themes here. Each moment is yours. So you have the freedom to make of any moment what you want. And that is expanding your time, because if you just waste your moments, they pass and you're in the next moment and you lost that moment. I'm trying to, quickly summarize, having skimmed the book just overnight because I just got it. Uh, your life is yours. You have the freedom of direction. You have all kinds of choices, and if you don't think all the time about the opportunities you have, you'll miss those opportunities. And civilization is yours. It's also about community and the world and how we can make a difference. That's my quick take. Is that reasonable?
That's pretty cool, Larry, for a quick overnight flight to with a quick rapid move through the book. But the book is modest in size and um, I think of it as a book of wisdom. So I'll hopefully be sharing some of that as we go on.
Yeah. The the preface is written by, I forget who it is, but it
Julian
must be,
Powell.
say again?
Julian Powell is his name.
Jenny Powell.
He's, yeah, an Oxford grad and historian, and is active in government and politics in England.
Well, he wrote a beautiful preface, and he connects you to Spinoza and John Rawls. That's a pretty interesting combination of people. John Rawls, the philosopher, Spinoza, the philosopher, modern, recent philosopher. Rawls passed away, but he's a 20th century philosopher, did fundamental work that influenced economics quite a bit. Uh, and Spinoza, of course, from the Middle Ages. And uh, and then you're also in the book citing others uh, poems by uh, different writers that are kind of focused on taking time and taking time seriously and taking moments seriously. Maybe we could start with you're kind of giving us an overview, and then and you kind of start the book out with helping people think about how to meditate and how to more or less stop time and then expand it. So take it away.
Oh, cool. What an introduction. My God. Larry, thank you for that. And I will say what I said just before we got on. I've been really looking forward to this conversation with you because I really enjoy, I've been longing for a conversation with someone who's really steeped in economics and prides himself on thinking like an economist. I was in my uh, youth, if it can be called that. On my first marriage, I was married to a woman whose father was a top economist at Yale, and I briefly minored in economics at Harvard, as you know, and I've always loved the field and followed many of the Nobel Prize winners and studied their stuff when they came out. So I've been looking forward to a conversation that has some rigor around it in that regard.
Oh, cool. Who was your father-in-law?
He became he was second in command to what was his name was John Perry Miller, and he was second in command to Kingman Brewster, and
Okay.
he set up so he became their dean, the dean of the school, and he was very influential in terms of setting up their business school, which was more a school of public policy and that kind of thinking. And anyway, he was quite a fellow. And we would have debates, man. And I mean, that was what was really interesting. You know, you've described me as this, you know, odd character in a way, but because there's so many different sides to my life. And that was one of the debates we had was about universities. And because his passion was really, you know, creating a great university and making it better and better. And and we had this incredible debate about genius because one of the people I quoted was William Blake. Well, he would have been the last person to appear in a university, um, and genius and universities, and he argued sharply with me that universities were not a place for genius necessarily. They were more a place for gathering kind of understandings and for having people who then taught them to the students. So I was stunned by that. I was a young man. It was the 60s and early 70s, and I was all for, let's make something happen. And I think my passion has always been, the book really talks about it, the three domains of freedom. My passion has been freedom from the 60s, from my readings, and what is the nature of freedom? And I was constrained, as many people have been, to make a living. How do you got to make a living somehow. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth, so I did tax returns for a living, was how I started off. And what I slowly began to realize was that people also coming out of the 60s in those early days, they weren't living the lives of freedom that they had imagined
Right.
either. And so I began to kind of wrestle with that. And at first wrestling with it just in the profession, as maybe there's a way that I could adjust what I'm doing as a professional to help people with their money to make lives of freedom. And so that was the genesis of the life planning movement. but I was already a practicing meditator, and I have grown in, and I guess early on, I mean, in the, coming out of the 60s, how could you not have thoughts about civilization? And as I said, I minored for a year or two in economics at Harvard. So so this book in a way is a summary of my thoughts about freedom in three uh, important domains in our life. One of them, the one on civilization, is more politics and economics. That John Rawls, of course, comes to mind. And the mid-level, your life is yours, is the life planning level, but it starts with each moment is yours. And I would frame, I love how you framed it and what you got out of it. And one of the things that I learned, I mean, early on, I was doing mindfulness and meditative work because I was inspired by these, images of freedom that you'd read in the contemplative traditions of all over the world. And I thought, wow, that sounds pretty cool. And so I went at it with a passion. And initially, in all my trainings with financial advisors, we use mindfulness as one of the practices that we introduce briefly, but in all of the major trainings, 5-day trainings, we'll have that as part of it. And initially, I thought of it because I used it because I thought, well, this is clearly about freedom. But what I began to realize was that mindfulness, I mean, there are different levels of it, and having to do with this notion that each moment is yours. So what I have come to recognize in the last few years is that mindfulness is the practice of the mastery of the
Mhm.
present moment. There's nothing else that does that, that just focuses on the moment itself. And you might go, well, yeah, okay. I gotta make a living, I gotta pay my bills, I gotta do this in the future, I got this history in the past and everything. But and that's all true. But in the book, I also remap time and space. I take this bold approach that maybe we've mapped time and space wrong. Because if you really reflect on it, this is one of those childlike questions that Einstein said we should all keep asking, and were the basis of his great thinking. And the question is, have you ever experienced? It's a trick question. Everybody gets it wrong, and that's important. Have you ever experienced a moment of freedom in the past? And you think about it. Yeah, of course. I just step out in the spring breeze or in this beautiful early fall weather, and I feel that sense of freedom, or making love, or doing something wildly creative, doing something with my students that just embraces who they are, touches who they are, and all that's great. I get everybody to raise their hand. Sometimes I've done this with an audience of 1,000, and it's very cool. Get everybody to raise
Yeah.
their hand. And then you say, well, y'all got it wrong. None of us have ever experienced a moment of freedom in the past. The only time we've ever experienced freedom is in the present moment. So,
And
you know,
and people react to, oh, I don't understand what, explain.
yeah. So
Yeah.
people get confused by it, and it makes them do a double, double think or something, and that's important. It's such an obvious thing that the only thing we ever experience, and we experience it again and again and again, is this flourishing nature of the present moment coming up in our life. We think about it, and we analyze it, and we structure our life in terms of the past and the future. Primarily, I've got to go to Whole Foods after our conversation. Oh, I forgot to do that text message going back into the past that was really important. So we frame our life a lot around the past and the future. It's very useful around history and our predictions for the future. And you and I have built careers on that, and that's, very valuable. But the, this is another realm of truth, and it's in some way it's a larger realm, a deeper realm, more profound, in that every moment is fresh and and
So is
is
it the freedom, are you thinking the freedom of doing something in that moment or the freedom of not doing something in the moment?
Well, that again,
Because mindfulness or meditation, when at the beginning of the book, you start talking about how to actually practice it, 30 minutes of sitting and letting your mind go basically blank, I guess, would be a way. I mean, I have done a little meditation my day, but I think I probably need to come to one of your retreats and get your instruction. But tell us, is this freedom to let your mind wander, or freedom to let your mind be quiet?
Well, it encompasses both. Uh, the freedom that I'm talking about, trying to narrow into what freedom means. What does it mean in terms of time? What does it mean in terms of the story of our life? That's your life is yours, the kind of the hero's journey that we feel about our life. What does it mean in civilization, where it's a huge topic in America, always has been, and in this election and every others. But it's a topic for politics, it's a topic for civilization, it's a topic for economics. So there are these three realms that I'm looking at. And when you talk about this realm of practice, the practice of mindfulness is a practice to attempt, and it's worse than learning how to play the piano for someone who's not that musical. You feel like you're all thumbs at it, because the attempt is to return to the present moment, to come back to it, not to hold on to it because you can't. It keeps coming up in its own way, freshly, again and again. So it's really exploring what it is to meet the present moment, if we can possibly do it. And so the more that you do that, the more that in order to practice this mastery of the present moment, you are learning intuitively, internally, how to let go of all those things that distract you from the present moment. So one of the things that's related to um, your career as an academic is that there was a study that was done, and I don't know how strong any of these studies are, but it was of people who meditated for 6 weeks and then they took their SAT exams, and done against a group that didn't take the mindfulness course. And of course, the people who did the mindfulness for six weeks did much better on their exams. And it was like 10 or 15% better. And
That's huge. That's amazing.
it's amazing. And so you go, well, how on earth does that happen? It doesn't make you smarter, does it? And no, not really. But what it does is that it gathers your focus. If you think about taking exams, and I don't know what it was like for you. I mean, I was pretty good at it myself, but the where I would fail would be I would get distracted in one way or another. And so I wouldn't really be right on the problem. I was
Worst, yeah. My worst exam ever was I thought this was going to be the end of my career, actually. This was in college. It was a calculus 2 class, and we had 4 exams, and then fortunately the professor said the worst of the 4 you can throw out. And so I thought I knew everything. I thought I knew everything. I went in there, and I was kind of a pretty anxious guy throughout my career, still probably am at some level. So, and lots of reasons why there was this anxiety underlying everything about career. So, and I have these career plans. I knew if I didn't do well in math, uh, things were going to end. And a C or something like that in a math class was a death knell. And so I'm sitting in this exam, knowing for sure at the beginning that I knew everything, and starting to see questions that I didn't know the answers to, and or wasn't sure. All of a sudden, I get super anxious and start think I couldn't even focus on the questions. I just thought focused on failing. And
very,
and of course I ended up with like a C, C minus. The next couple 3 exams I got A's. So I ended up with an A in the class. I got Yeah, but it scared the hell out of me. It focused me to study much more intensely. But also I know that this anxiety can take over, and completely distract you. And so having a mechanism beyond medication or drugs to calm you down, to have that knowledge that you have this kind of self-control is freeing, right? Because you're freeing from yourself,
Right.
from what you're putting onto yourself.
Enormously so. And that's part of the what's going on here. And I encourage you, if you're at all intrigued, to look at this in a variety of ways, because this is quite profound when you get right down to it. I mean, we know we have this history of our life, and we know that civilization's going through this thing where it's trying to create more freedom for everybody and everything, and we're part of that. But the notion that each moment is a moment, potentially a domain of freedom for us, is and not just what happens when all that anxiety goes away. What happens when, if we're really able to be here? What happens if that energetic, vital, flourishing nature of the present moment arising? I think it's the most powerful force in the world. I think this is much more powerful than they talk about the atom holds the power. I don't think so at all. I think it's the present moment, because there's nothing that can stop it. So it has this force to it, this energy to it, this vitality to it. And yet, when you do the meditative practice of returning it again and again, and you feel like a failure, even after I've been doing this, man, for over 50 years. I started at Harvard, and in a very simple way, and I've been doing it for several hours a day, much of that time. And I still, it's you can't kind of hold on to the present moment. It keeps changing. So it's humbling in that way. But what you're learning a lot of things about what it is to be alive, what is the nature of the universe, what is the nature of time. But for me, the most interesting thing is freedom.
So
And
when you meditate, when you are in this kind of self-awareness, uh, mindfulness moment, uh, what goes through your mind? Is it, or you say you sit on the bench outside your house, and you tend to look, maybe you look at the floor, the wood floor, or you look at some, you focus on something, not all over the place, but just something. And uh, do you let your mind go and just not think, or do you let your mind focus on that thing, or do you let your mind focus on a particular issue? I mean, I've just to say, when I get one of the things that's most relaxing to me is actually thinking about an economics problem at when I can't sleep, like at 1 or 2 in the morning. It's like if I can come up with a good economics problem to concentrate on, then it might keep me up for a little bit, but it focuses my mind so it doesn't kind of like start worrying about this, that, or the other, what I have to do in the morning. When I'm writing, and I write a lot, um, that to me is very, in some ways, relaxing. When you get around the anxiety of what are you going to say next, and you just kind of let your mind do its own thing, um, and let it just pop into your brain as opposed to trying to instruct it. um, that is exciting because stuff comes out that you didn't expect, and it's just there, it kind of flows. But yeah, if you stress over it, then it becomes very difficult to get anything else. And it's also a matter of practice. You're abs I'm trying to see if there's an analogy here uh, between these things, because the longer I've, throughout my days, when I've done a zillion appearances like you have, and radio interviews and TV interviews and press interviews and public addresses, and in the beginning I would get quite nervous, but then um, it somehow I got to the point where that went away, and was able just to be not worry about it. Um,
Mm.
and just focus on what I was doing and try and do the best of it at it. And that is actually very calming and relaxing.
Mm. Mm.
Is that so? What happens to you when you're sitting here being mindful?
Well, you really touch on so many aspects of it, Larry, and um, uh, there's so many different aspects to this. So as you probably know, I'm a poet as well, and my what I thought of as my legacy, my hero's journey, my life of freedom, was to live on this spit of land, going out into a pond the size of Walden Pond, and explore through nature, because nature is a great teacher of mindfulness. Every time we walk into nature, we feel it on our skin, and we feel these subtle changes, whether there's a breeze there, or it's temperature change, or it's the movement of our body. All of those are, so nature is a great teacher of being present, of being right here, if we allow ourselves to be here. We often use it as a place to ruminate, but I encourage people to let go of that rumination and just experience, see what you can do to just experience what that is like. So as a poet, I had the same experience that you have, which as a writer, which is that it is a focus, it is a mindfulness kind of focus, because what you're trying to do is come into that moment and make the very best of that moment, of really knowing what is called for in that moment and meeting it precisely, and then delivering something. So you're both reflecting on what the situation is, you're approaching it. You have maybe a number of thoughts, and then you just go at what you see as being correct or right. And in poetry, there's endless revisions, and every revision it gets better. And part of that is that you're actually, it's a process, writing is a process of communicating. So I'm trying to make every line more appropriate to the person who's going to be reading it. And likewise, if I'm writing an economics article, I'd be trying to make it, no, this, they won't get this, or this is going to pull them off in a different direction, and I want to get them right here. So it's great. It's communicative stuff, and it's very related to mindfulness. If I'm sitting on that stoop, I can just let my mind go. But what I learned over time, I mean, in the early days, I would go for these very open states of consciousness. There are all these different ways of meditating, and I would go into these, spiritual or virtuous kind of things. And like you were saying, do you contemplate something? Is there something you're thinking about? And what I learned over time was that the most powerful and deepest and most difficult, but also the most rewarding way of doing this was to let go of every thought, any thought that comes up. Don't attach to any of them, and keep coming back, attempting to come back and returning to just this moment. And even though you can't do it, and even though it sounds, is the word peripatetic? It sounds like, like there's a lot of anxiety possibly there, a lot of energy possibly. What happens is two remarkable things. One is, because of that endeavor, you get more clear and focused and present, and energized with that. You're there moment after moment after moment, but you also find yourself getting really relaxed. And I think part of that relaxation is that you're stripping the mind of all those thoughts where there's any kind of ego, any kind of holding on that we have, which I think is really where the problem comes in terms of feeling free or not feeling free. So so that anyway, that's, and
Is
it's a
it
life mission. Yeah, go ahead.
to what extent is it free or I mean, imagine that your muscles are tensed up all the time and you had some and you're in pain from that maybe all day long, and you had some technique you could practice that would relax them, and maybe that would keep them relaxed the whole day or and every day. If you do this, then they over time the uh this tensing up that became maybe a habit uh was eliminated.
Right,
Um,
right.
the so do you think this might be somehow physiological, some chemical thing that you're actually having your neurons kind of relax or send different chemical messages, which is no chemical messages maybe between or electric messages between the different synapses. You think there might be something of that? Has anybody actually done any studies of people who are meditating where they have brain sensors attached to see if that matters?
Hugely, yeah. And in neuroscience, you Google, scientific research on this, and it's all over the place right now. It's happening everywhere because this is, people who are meditating are really attempting to look at the nature of consciousness itself, moment by moment. And so that's really quite intriguing. And then there's results from it. And then that's quite intriguing in the whole field of neuroscience that, as you know, exploded over our lifetime. Was hardly there at our beginning. And so I think that is true. And I think there's something deeper and truer than neuroscience. And that is the nature of the moment itself. That's, if you go actually to Planck and physics, and you go to the Planck scale of distance and the Planck scale of time, there is a Planck scale of time. And that scale of time is, I think, something like 10 to the minus 33rd seconds. It's 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 quite extraordinary. And so neuroscience will show what's happening in the body. And I will say, I was just walking, you know, out along this road along our house yesterday, and I was reflecting on I mean, I'm an old man at this point. Let's look at it. Let's be frank. I mean, I'm so 76 years old, and I have long COVID, so there's a lot of issues about how vital I can be. And I'm walking along that road, and I go, "Wow, this is amazing. I feel so present. I feel so here." And then I was looking at my body, just feeling what was happening in my body, and I was going, "Gee, your body, in spite of all this, is so relaxed." And the thought was just exactly what you're saying, that this is coming because not because I'd attempted to relax the body, but that over time I've done a lot of work toward being here in the moment. And so and being here means being in the practice, it means being aware of what is happening sensationally inside the body. So you're very subtly aware of these shifts of sensation. And so it was what I was realizing was that I was quite naturally relaxing, almost unconsciously, but able to look at that and go, be stunned by it, and go, oh, that didn't always happen. And so, yeah, I think that is, those are among the benefits. And they talk about that. Again, you Google mindfulness and you'll find talks
So,
about.
so how does now, so you do this with financial, let's think a little bit more about the
Yeah,
second part and the third book part of the books. You talk about the freedom of choice of what you're going to do, not just in the moment, but in the next moments. And when you have your retreats with the financial planners, you do the meditation, you do train them about mindfulness. You do get them, let's say, to relax or start to learn how to relax mentally. How does that connect to your instructing them about, you know, being better financial planners, being
yeah.
uh, is this like let's take it down a notch so that we think about what's really important um, in your life, but also your client's life, that it's not just, you know, let's focus on the kind of fundamental, you're here now, and they have to enjoy here and now as well as tomorrow uh, and tomorrow and then maybe more money, but less fun along the way. And yes, it's good for you, perhaps fee wise, but maybe not really because they might actually come back if you actually make them happier. That it's really about utility, which is what economics, is referencing lifetime happiness, not lifetime money per se. We have our fundamental formulation of utilities about consumption and leisure. These are the two fundamental aspects of happiness, of fun and consumption. I mean, both are fun. How much you get to how many ice cream cones, but also how much time on the beach. Uh, And then there's this trade-off between working, which is kind of the opposite of beach time, and but it does let you consume and have, uh, and that's required. Can't spend the whole time on the beach.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really, as you know, I'm really intrigued to have real economic conversation with you, and I will get there even more when we go to the civilization realm. And so the notion of utility is
So I'm going
one.
to move down here where there's less sun.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I pulled my blinds before we started. I've got these practically, yeah, you can see this.
We have I think the oldest house, I live in Providence now. We have the oldest house in Providence. It's 200, it's 1720,
No way.
304 years. You got to come down here, George.
No
It's
way.
like living in a museum. It's,
Oh my
you
God,
can see the
Larry,
wooden floors here.
that
This is
is
a chimney. It's got four fireplaces. Yeah,
wow.
yeah, it's really cool.
How wonderful. Is that up? Is it near the Brown campus or is it
Yeah, it's about, yeah, a mile, less than a mile from the Brown campus, right on off of Benefit Street.
yeah,
So,
Bedford Street? Cool.
yeah, we just,
Very neat. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I got to go. I'd not really been at Brown much and then my daughters, of course, just just started college. They're midway through now. And one of them's got junior year abroad in Rome at the moment. But we went to Brown and looked at it, and what a beautiful place to live, to settle.
Well, come on down. We're around the corner, right?
Yeah, I'd
So
love to. I love to. That's very exciting.
anytime, just call and say I'm coming.
Cool, cool.
Yeah.
Well, so utility. So it's a little bit different. So in the early days, I taught mindfulness in the programs. I mean, the programs are what, 25 years old now. I just wrote a little or gave a little video blog about how they began in a way. So they're 25 years old, and the writing that I did for 7 stages was 30 years old. And so in the early days, I was thinking, I'm going to do this because I know freedom's related to this. I felt it, so I'm just going to include it. And and then I began to realize, oh, this is a listening exercise. And what I think when people learn about my work, they mostly hear about something called the 3 questions, which are these visioning exercises, imagining who it is you want to be. And they're profound and they're deep and they're profound and they're rich. And so all the news organizations have gone all over them and they're talked about a lot. But what they don't realize, because those are kind of sexy, but what they don't realize is that the primary thing that I've taught and that great life planners do, great financial planners do, is they listen, and they listen really well. And what I came to realize was that mindfulness meditation is an exercise in listening in a deep way to yourself, but not listening to your thoughts. I mean, that's the funny thing. This is, freedom. I keep approaching it as something that is free of thought. Thought obviously is very important to me, as
Freedom not to think.
well. It's just the somehow an
Freedom.
experience that's independent of thought. Thought can wander through. It can be part of the tapestry of a moment. It usually is. But the experience of freedom is richer than that in some way. Or is the thrill of that unusual thought that comes up. So in the trainings that I give, we do in the long trainings, the 4 or 5 days, which is the primary signature training of becoming a registered life planner. We do 20 to 30 minutes of that day is mindfulness meditation. And what I realized is that the people that do this well and adopt it become better listeners for their clients. And you can see that in the client's response. We do follow-up work with people. We have CEUs that go on for years. So we see, and they're the best listeners. And part of it is related to what you were talking about earlier, the anxiety that you were talking about, that the more that you get close to the present moment, the more that you can let your anxiety go. But there's something even more amazing than letting your anxiety go. And that is that the more clear you are, the more you know that anxiety, and you feel free even in the midst of it. So the mindfulness is a natural training. I mean, we know we use therapy a lot for this, but mindfulness is a natural training that's cheap that anybody can do all over the world that trains you in emotional intelligence. Because to be in the present moment, you've got to be freer of your frustrations, your anxieties, your uh, anger, your passions, whatever they are.
You have to look at things from a distance, so to speak. No, perhaps another way of saying it.
Well,
If you're
it can
if
be.
you're interacting with somebody, let's say you have with a client, you have to abstract your own self from the situation. Uh, Now you're spending so these retreats are 4 days. We're talking about 4 days. We're talking about 2 hours of meditation over 4 days. What else comprises the 4 days?
Well, they're actually 4 to 5 days. They're 5 days if they're live, and they're 4 days if we do Zoom. So COVID taught us to do Zoom, and been pretty incredible. I mean, it's challenging to be on the computer all day, but you and I, here we are, we're looking eyeball to eyeball. Imagine where there's 12 or 13 of us, and that we don't do many more than that in a deep workshop like this. You can see everybody eyeball to eyeball. So
Right.
two people are having an encounter, you can see exactly their responses. You can see their emotions. And that's something you can't do in a live thing. In a live thing, you have more of the feel of it and all, and that's quite wonderful. But so what we do in the rest of it, we pair people up. So you would come in and you'd pair up with somebody else, and that person becomes your life planner, and you become their life planner, and it's real. You're not play acting. It's not like you're going to do a Shakespeare play or something and you have to learn the lines. This is real. It's about you. Who do you really want to be? What's your answer to the three questions?
Just
How
repeat 3 questions maybe for everybody.
should I go through them quickly? Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the first meeting is really about listening. In an evoke process. Evoke is an acronym for E, first meeting exploration, V, second meeting vision. That's where the three questions are. O, third meeting, the obstacles that come up. Uh, K, fourth meeting, knowledge. There you go. That's what you and I were trained in. That's where the analytics comes in and the spreadsheets and all the rest. And E, execution, making it happen. So these meetings could be 10 minutes long, so you could all put it all together in an hour, or they could be 2 hours each. But it's a
Mhm.
process. It's the process. So you gather and you pair up with your partner and you listen to why they're here, why they want to be engaged in a financial planning process. What do they want to arrive at? Not just the figures, but who do they want to be at the end of the process? What do they want to, what freedom do they want out of this process?
Right,
Uh,
right.
and then the second one is actually looking at, well, what might freedom look like? So the three questions are one of like three or four exercises we have, and it's the easiest for again to express in a meeting like this. So the first question would be, if you had all the money you needed, what would you do? How would you live? You know, all right. We fantasize that, winning the lottery or whatever. Doesn't necessarily mean you're as rich as King Charles or somebody, but it means, you got a lot of money and you got enough. And then the second one, and for some people that isn't that much, if you have all you need. The second question is, if you only had 5 to 10 years left to live, you suddenly realize that.
What would
What,
you do?
yeah, what would shift? What would you do? How would you live then? So that's more reflective, and we go a little bit more toward relationships often, but it goes closer to legacy, and legacy is often relationship oriented, but not entirely, and not always. And then the third question goes deepest still, and it's one you can't ask someone if they think you're just a salesperson, because they will buckle at you and they won't answer it. So you have to have established a sense of trust, and that's trustworthiness, which is what we do in the program. So the third question is, if you only have 24 hours left to live, the doctor shocks you and suddenly you realize that and you go, oh my God. And it isn't what do you do in that moment. It's not going to the bar or gathering your friends around you or something like that. It's um, reflecting on the things you'd anticipated going forward and doing and being. What did you miss? Who did you not get to be? What did you not get to do? And that question tends to be the focus. Not always, but I'd say 90% of the time it might be the focus. Other elements come in, but because that's a life and death question, that's a legacy question.
This must be pretty emotional for some people.
So yeah, it's profound. It's profound. I mean, we'll have our box of tissues nearby just in case, but we're not therapists. We're not doing therapy. We're just there in a kind way to help facilitate this. And but it's mostly more often tears of joy than tears of, uh, of sadness or sorrow or frustration. And so, because what we do is we go, let's do it. Let's make it happen. And that's incredible. That's the breath, first real breath of freedom after you establish trust is this notion of I can do it. I've been thinking I'd put this off till retirement or and or for 15 years from now or whatever. Man, I can make this happen. And it isn't always, you can't always get the island in paradise right now, but you can move toward it in a way that feels flourishing inside. And that's what we think great
Maybe it
work.
might be visiting a friend you haven't seen for a long time, or
Absolutely.
spend time with a brother or something like that.
Absolutely.
Could be a lot of things.
Yeah.
And that's certainly something that other your clients are going to fundamentally want to do, and you want to help them figure out how to do it financially. Yeah, how can we put enough money away so you can make that trip across country and spend 2 weeks and put aside your work, whatever. The so this is this I know you're pulling together your many years of work and the other contents of the other books, and is this the content of what is the middle section of your book, your current book? Uh, I want to make sure we, cover the entire we summarize the entire book, and we've got these three key sections of it. Each moment, your life is yours, and that's starting to sound like your life is yours, which means think about if you only had so much time left, what would you do with it? And then civilization is yours. Where's the civilization is yours come in?
Yeah. So should I dive in?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, Ivan.
Okay. So just to reframe as you've just done, my my purpose or my passion in doing this book was I mean all of my work, all of my books have been about freedom in a way. One of my students told me that once. I went, what? But I thought about it. Yeah, they have been. And uh and so my notion here in this time of turmoil, um, I mean, I don't know what it was. You and I are of a similar age, and I don't know what
You're
you.
76, I'm 73. Uh,
Okay, so yeah, I got a few years on you, but
yeah.
still, we there was I grew up in the 50s and as a boy, and life was good. It felt like, and it felt like we would just go further in making it better and better. And the 60s were kind of kind of a reorientation or a challenge around it and everything. But you know, so it's a lot to be here 76 years old and feel like what, as my kids go on the text, WTF? I mean, what is going on here? And why is this so crazy? Politically, socially, um, economically, why is civilization in such a tough place? And the earth. So what I wanted to do was to give a frame that started with the experience of freedom, experiencing it in moments, experiencing it as the trajectory of your life, as your hero's journey. Each of us has one. And what is and to live it and to give people that possibility and see that they really could live it, so that you have those two frames to stand on, to live from. And then we can go to the realm of civilization and not feel so one down, which we all do. Like, I'm just one person out of 8 billion. What on earth can I do? Right. And,
Right.
but the truth is that in some way we all are doing something. And And all of our action is important. And it's not that we all have to become political, but that every time we engage in the world, right now, you and I are engaging in civilization. We're making civilization happen. You by making these podcasts over the years have made civilization happen in an extraordinary way, and each of us does it in our own way. And so my thought was, let's give people the solid ground so they feel they can do that. And then let's give them the notion, like a Steven Pinker kind of notion, of all the great things that civilization has delivered to us. Let's celebrate that. Let's feel that, right? And then
I
let's look at
should,
what's that?
I should point out, yeah, Steven Pinker, he actually came to mind a moment ago. He's I'm not quite sure what his field is. I think he's at Harvard, and I think he might be philosophy. I'm not quite sure. And he's written books. Well, I guess a recent book is about civilization is getting better, that we've actually had less violence historically, that things are actually better, and we should look on the bright side, so to speak, that humanity's improving in a very slow pace, but definitely the direction's positive. Uh,
Right.
which and he's I could think he's running into some flack on that, but yeah. So, and have
So,
you met Pinker?
pardon?
Have you met him?
I haven't met him, no. I mean, I'd love to, and I'd love to debate him and take him on. But I, who couldn't love what he's doing? I mean, a lot of people, I guess, get over, he's like this and I'm over here. I like to incorporate things, and I think what he's doing is a great service. That a lot of times we get down and mopey about the world, and there's reasons for that. That's valuable, but it's also valuable to see all the great things that have happened, and that, I'm living longer than most of my ancestors, and I have, glasses that work, and I've got, talk about civilization. One of the most amazing things are these cell phones where, I mean, well, let's see, where am I going? Do I want to get there yet? But I will go there just briefly. But just imagine this, that if, here we are. So Steven Pinker says celebrate what we've got and acknowledge that we've done great things. Great. I'll give that to him. And I think all of us can value that and can feel better about ourselves and what we've done as a species. Civilization is who we are. And that's something we sometimes separate it. It's who we are. And that's a critical notion. And it's valuable to um, celebrate that, who we are as a species. But then also to look, like you were talking about earlier, can you look critically at a situation and see what's really happening there? And I think we want to celebrate it and then look critically. So I give in the book, the first half of the civilization chapter is about let's celebrate joy. And there's wonderful stuff that's happening here. And use that platform of feeling that participating in that joy to now look at those areas where you think something needs to be done. And some of us, it's just, the garden in our backyard. It's our kids. And those are good. Those are valuable. That's part of civilization, raising our kids.
Another angle on the whole freedom concept here is empowerment. If you're empowered to take every moment and make something different of it, or make nothing of it, to free up your mind to be relaxed enough to do something more the rest of the day, uh, now, and you're empowered to know what is really important, through your thinking about what's essential to your life. Now you're also empowered to think, well, if I can change myself and I can change others, I can change society. Um, so you lose fear. It's kind of an anti-anxiety meditation, not medication, but it's um yeah. The I think of one little maybe this is connected, but I had a grad student He was probably the top grad student I've ever had in economics in my department, and his name was Jonathan, and he was always standing up in the seminars. We had 35 people sitting down listening to the speaker. Jonathan's tall guy, standing up the whole time. And some point I said, Jonathan, why are you standing up? He said, well, I have excruciating back pain, terrible back. If I sit down, it's incredibly uh, painful. I can't do it. So basically, 4 years go by. He's standing up every time. Uh, Occasionally, I think he went to a chiropractor, finally broke down, went to a chiropractor. That helped a bit. And then he got a job in New York in a high-powered Wall Street firm, and things really went, his back really got bad. So he finally decides to see an orthopedist and has all the exams. I go down to visit him like a month later. I said, "How's your back?" He says, "Perfectly fine." He said, I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Well, I had all these exams. I found out there was nothing wrong at all. It was entirely in my head. It was entirely my anxiety, um, and it was psychosomatic. And I had tensing those muscles in my back the whole time, and then to see whether or not it had gone away, I tensed them some more because how else are you going to check unless you tense them, right? To see if there's something. So sending those signals, um, and now he has no back pain. I mean, imagine 4 years of self-agony, and so, and we're all living this at some level. And he gave me a book. He said that that he had gotten about, it was a thick book written by a very serious person about psychosomatic illness and how it can be contagious. I talked about my back, and your back starts hurting because you start tensing your back to check if your back's okay. And then the thesis of the book was that we have these psychosomatic uh, behaviors because we're worried about dying, and we want to distract our mind from dying. And yeah, but you're saying let's distract our mind by not thinking at some level.
Well, here I love that, and I wonder if the book was by John Sarno because I had terrible back pain at one point, and so and something similar happened for me, and it was extraordinary, and I couldn't believe that it was psychosomatic or it had to do with my emotions. I absolutely fiercely was against it because I knew so much about feelings already. But anyway, there's a lot of truth to it. I'm thrilled for your student. What a great thing.
Yeah, I was misdiagnosed with MS when I was
Oh,
in my late early 30s, and they the doctor said, well, I went to Yale New Haven. They said you have MS. Went to MGH. They said we don't do these tests anymore. They screwed them up. You don't have it. I was so nervous. I didn't know why I was having this anxiety, and I was like feeling off balance. Everything went downhill. Within 6 months, I needed Xanax. I needed something very strong, and I got off it to relax because everything started hurting, and I couldn't function. I became paranoid about being around people. Just took myself down the tubes just from worrying about this. It wasn't real. And so the mind's a very powerful thing. And the well, I learned, yeah, at a very painful way, uh, to that this is a real thing, and that everybody has to kind of control their anxiety. That we all have anxiety, and that it can be dangerous to our lives.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow. Powerful, Larry. Well, I'm sorry. I'm glad you moved through that and learned those lessons. Those are often uh, the most important things in our life to learn lessons that are that deep and that powerful with that much struggle around them. Um, and talking of it, just going to civilization. We've kind of led to this point in the conversation. So the close of the book is about those struggles we're going through in society right now. And so I bring up the fact that, what's going on. And I want to talk about this in economic terms. So I want to frame this in a way. But I do want to say that I address very directly these challenges to democracy that have arisen recently. Certainly the threat to the earth that is there with global warming and everything. I address the craziness in media and standards of truth. And what I look at, first of all, is the fact, really, that democracy can't survive without truth, without having some standard of truth so that we can vote. I mean, if we don't know what's true, how can we vote? And yeah, that the bell curve and everything. There's the truth is there's a range of truth, but it's a bell curve too. And I won't talk.
Meaning there's some center, so there's some high degree of truth right in the
Yeah,
middle. Somewhere.
absolutely. There's a bell curve around everything. And all these conspiracy things that are so crazy that are out there on the left and the right, they're way at the far ends. And if they're presented in a way that they are the truth, then we're in trouble in terms of voting. And what happens is that the media becomes very polarized around this truth or that truth. And then we are really servants to those huge forces of media. But what we have, if we can, but I want to go back in a variety of ways, but just look at the cell phone for a minute and can contemplate the cell phone, that if in fact, the media was required, we had the standards of truth back with the fairness doctrine in the 80s, and then that collapsed as we went into more of a decentralized vision of freedom. But if we had a world where the media was required to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and we began to frame, well, what does that look like? And we used things like what is investigative reporter required to tell the truth? What is a scientific truth? How is that established? What is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? What does a bell curve of truth look like? What does the fairness doctrine look like? And we went at this in our schools of journalism and politics and everything. We'd come up with something that was pretty good, and where in
It's
fact,
like an 11th commandment.
yeah,
Tell the
geez,
truth, tell the truth to the
yeah,
best of you. And then we have not truth police, but truth maybe evaluators, graders. Is this journalist up to some measure of truth telling? How many? To what extent is he checking his facts? I mean, that's kind of basics to academics. You don't
absolutely.
put out anything in economics unless you've checked it over. I I have three different. I generally have different RAs. Double check the other RAs when I use RAs to do something because people make mistakes, but they're sloppy sometimes.
Right.
And but mostly they're fantastic people, students. So, but they do make mistakes. Yeah.
And back to my ex-father-in-law who said, there's no place for genius in uh, uh, in academia. He was at Yale. No place for genius. What are you talking about? But we in that bell curve, there's conspiracy theories over here, but there's also Galileo, right?
Hmm.
Before Galileo got to the middle there, he was way over here. So in terms of science, there are going to be really valuable ideas that are going to be on the fringe, and we need to have room for them. It doesn't mean we cross those things out. We have a place for them. But when we're required to vote, if we buy into one ecosystem of media versus another ecosystem of media, there's not a standard of truth that is there that we are voting from and debating and thinking about ourselves. We've bought into one frame or another. And that is the end of democracy. And that
Yeah.
is the end of the planet because you can't, you get these powerful forces get to determine what happens. So this was something. So economically, think about this. 250 years ago, we had this explosion, right? In it was the Industrial Revolution, 250 years ago. And sometime 100 years or so later in America, we began to really implement something that had begun in England hundreds of years before when the monastic community had limited liability for their little corporations or everything. And we began to build that into incorporating. And it enabled this amazing explosion, right? Because now you got to, not only did you have the widgets being able to be mass manufactured, but you got to have money that was mass manufactured in a way through capital, through debt, and in other ways. And so you built these hierarchies of power, these little governments, really, but not democratic governments, but little really engines of power. So what I started to think when I was thinking about democracy and the earth and the truth was, and Pinker, was if this system was the very best system that we could come up with, wouldn't we, after 250 years of experimentation, of innovation, wouldn't we find at the top of every one of these hierarchies of power the best of humanity? Wouldn't we find our wisdom and compassion? And that filtering down through these systems.
Mhm.
And you go, well, yeah, maybe we should. But do we find it anywhere? And the truth is, no, we can't find it. We really can't find it anywhere. Some people might argue with that. They'll find one or two places where it exists. But so my thought was, okay, so we've got a great system. It's done incredible things. And the other thought that's been coming is this globalization. So here we are. This is an incredible time, as you well know, and you and I share this knowledge that and we are now global. This cell phone, 90% of humanity has a smartphone.
Right. We're all connected. Yeah.
We're all connected. And so if it does tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, can't humanity kind of weigh these things, think these things through, and make reasonable decisions in reasonably structured areas? So that's so, so we're global. So what happens globally? And this notion of negative externalities, when you think about, well, okay, so yeah, we got a great system, but we've really screwed up around the planet. And now there's stuff going wrong with democracy. And yeah, the truth in the media, there's some stuff crazy going on. So you go back to economics and you go, how does that happen economically if you've got, a good system and everything? And well, people talk about, well, there's always negative externalities. And what is intriguing is thinking about, and again, this term of going to scale. It's one that you and I use all the time, and it's one used in the financial world a lot. So here we are going to scale, and scale suddenly means global. Doesn't mean national, doesn't mean local. Scale means global. Great, great
Right.
scale. So what is happening with our negative externalities? They're going to scale. I grew up as a boy in Southern Ohio. I was born in West Virginia, and we had streams. We called them creeks, and they were bright orange. They were orange. And it was the coal company there. It was strip mining and everything. But negative externality, the oil companies didn't intend to burn up the earth. That was not, it was a negative externality. They didn't think that that would happen. Now, over time, maybe there is collusion and there's stuff going on over the last 40 or 50 years since Earth Day, but it wasn't an intention initially. So then I go, all right, so if something's creating these negative externalities that is threatening us, if we weren't able to develop wisdom and compassion at the top of every hierarchy of power, then maybe the system needs to be tweaked right at the base. Maybe it's just a simple tweak because it's done incredible things.
So what's your tweak?
Tweak is something that I call fiat. It's called fiduciary in all things. It's a single sentence. you'll see it in the book, and it's this
You
this
want to read it?
yeah, I'll read it to you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's a one sentence legislative proposal. A fiduciary, and I'm working on trying to get conferences now on this, focused on this, day long, maybe several days long, focused on this as a way of kind of trying to solve this stuff. So a fiduciary standard of obligation. So it's fiduciary, it's back to financial advisors. And you
Right.
know, from in terms of life planning, when I train people to listen, they're becoming better fiduciaries because they're putting the client first. So here, a fiduciary standard of obligation is required for all institutions, corporate, nonprofit, and governmental, to place the interests of all stakeholders, of truth, of humanity, democracy, and the living planet that sustains us first, above their own self-interest.
I think
And
that's yeah, I think that's a really powerful uh, phrasing of how we have to think about things going forward. You know, I talk to people about their being the fiduciary for themselves and their future selves, that they're responsible. Their future selves are the only person that's going to take care of those future selves is them. And then of course you're a fiduciary for your family and relatives and close family and then your community and the but to do all that you need to have kind of self-control and all your powers. And I think what you're saying is that it begins at a very personal level to be able to kind of control it. We have great power, but we have to be able to control it almost like superheroes, but that it may take, recharging our battery in a certain way so that we don't get distracted in doing too many things. The other thing that comes to mind about in economics about your concern about single-mindedness, that there's truth here and there's truth there. It's bimodal rather than distributional, as you're saying, is that when there's uncertainty, for example, in the debate, Vice President Harris said to former President Trump, you, well, you don't believe in climate change. Now, any anybody who looks at NASA's website might come away thinking that there was climate change for sure because the evidence that they're presenting is pretty convincing and NASA's a pretty credible source. But uh, there are some reasonable scientists who have laid doubts but uh, nobody could come away and say, I know for sure that this is not happening. So when there's one of the externalities that it's not just polluting a river, but it's putting people at risk. If you put yourself at risk, your future self at risk, that's a negative externality. You're harming them without you're having to pay for the price of doing that or of damaging them, just like not for polluting a stream. You're not paying for the people you're injuring by they're drinking that water or whatever, fishing from the polluted fish. There's the externality of warming up the climate if we're actually warming it. But what if we're not sure we're warming it? What if we're not sure these damages are going to occur, but that they might? There's a curve about, as you said, distribution of outcomes, of likelihoods. Well, that's putting risk on people in the future. If I gave you a chance right now, George, if I put a gun to your head and said, we're going to flip a coin, and if it's heads, you get $1 million from me, and if it's tails, I get $1 million from you. You would be worse off because the downside is worse than the upside, uh, right? And that because we're risk averse, and that goes back to uh, satiation, that if we're starving, it's much worse than if we're, stuffed. Uh, and uh, and so because of this, putting risk on our kids through climate change is itself an externality. Even if the average, the expected loss from climate change is zero, even if everybody, if somebody was a believer that on average there was no climate change occurring by human means, uh, there would still be an argument because of the possibility and because the downside is worse than the upside that of carbon damage, and then there's an argument for correcting it through carbon taxation or other types of carbon policies. And it turns out I've done a paper with a couple of colleagues in Europe shows that the magnitude of the carbon tax that we should be levying to deal with to deal with this uncertainty, to reduce the uncertainty, to limit the risk, is larger than the carbon tax that you should impose if you actually had no uncertainty, but you knew that the risk was what people think is the average in the future. So that that kind of connects to or a different way of looking at what you're saying a little bit.
I love it, and I love that you're engaged around this, Larry. And I didn't know that you were or you would be. I haven't looked at all your papers, but the that's exciting to hear your thinking around this. And it's exactly where what I'm trying to do is stir up an awareness. You said something powerful after hearing that fiduciary statement. You said that this is where this is a really powerful statement of where how we need to be thinking, and or something like that. And what um, so I'm trying to popularize this, and I'm working through. I've got interviewed by consumers occasionally, consumer press, interviewed a lot by the financial advisor press. And the financial advisors are of real use here. So we come to here, we've got something, we know we got a problem, and I'm saying, hey, I think there is a solution. It ain't that complex, but it's different. And anything that's
It might be a single word that spreads fiduciary. I really love this because I think it's a great word. It's not it's like a real world, a grown-up world word that connects to being an adult, connects to being a member of society, connects to taking control of yourself. It really pulls together everything in your book and your career. And we're in the moment.
yeah,
So
we are.
so George, this is the longest podcast I've had with anyone. The next one might go for 5 hours.
Oh my
Uh,
goodness.
uh, and I really appreciate and thank you for the book and for your contributions. Uh, you're you're God's gift to the planet, in my view, and not the only gift, but you are one of. And I'm not religious, okay? But here we go. I'm going to stop this.